And you will know my name is the Lord. And I'm walking here. I'm walking here.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Groovy.
Welcome to Box Office Pulp, everybody. As always, I'm Mike, joined by my co-hostess, Jamie. Say hello, Jamie.
Hello.
And we have a very, very, very special episode in store as the two of us recently got the chance to check out the documentary, which is also just became available to stream for everyone through Electric Entertainment. You can find it through various sources. I know it's on Amazon Prime. Is the probably maybe like the biggest one as of now, but it's popping up all over the place. That documentary is Rondo and Bob, detailing the often troubled life of Bob Burns, the absolutely legendary and brilliant art director who got to start with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and would go on to Hills Have Eyes, Tourist Trap, Reanimators, and so much more. But most importantly, to the documentary itself and the story it tells, it's kind of his obsession and fascination with the famed horror icon Rondo Hatton. A facet of Bob himself I had absolutely no clue about before this. Rondo, of course, famously known as the Creeper, and more or less used by Hollywood for his unfortunate disfigurement due to acromegalia. Any horror or film nerd worth their salt knows these guys, obviously. So likely any listener of this podcast. But how their two stories, as different as they can be, also line up in a kind of beautiful but somber and haunting symmetry of polar opposite but spiritual similarity. And it really makes you reflect, at least I know for me personally, on those around you who may look fine on the outside and you kind of often write off as wacky or eccentric, and how you might be actually ignoring their real needs. So, needless to say, this is a doc that really makes you sit down and focus a little bit more, and is beyond fascinating. It's an absolute must-see for any genre fan, but it definitely extends beyond that. And we are really, really happy to have the director of this very film, Joe Connell, here with us.
Thanks for having me, Guy.
I just want to start off by just asking what really pulled you toward making the film? How did you come across this story that there was even a story here to tell? Because it's something that's not, I wouldn't say is very well known.
Yeah, I mean, to Bob's friends. My first movie was called Danger God, or is called Danger God, about a B-movie stuntman, Gary Kent, B-movie stuntman and star. And Gary, and at the time, Bob Burns was a serial blood donor, which is very appropriate, and I think he probably liked the humor in that. And he reached the 5-gallon limit. And so they had a big event at the Austin, Texas blood bank for him. Gary Kent invited me to go to it, and I had never met Bob before. I was doing a newspaper column for the Austin American-Statesman about the film industry. And I showed up and talked to Bob, and at the end, he handed me a script, which was called Rondo and May. And it was a script he'd written about the love story of Rondo and his wife, May. And so we're near the end of doing Danger God. It's coming out, thinking about other stuff. My editor sends me some clips that he'd shot of Bob Burns in Seguin, Texas, where he lived in his last years. And then he sent me a clip. He said, he just said, I'm watching this video from the blood bank, and here comes Gary Kent in the room. And I said, yeah, am I right behind him? He said, yeah. We didn't know each other back then, but we realized that we both had this common thing with Bob Burns, that we both knew him. And so I thought, yeah, Bob Burns deserves a documentary just about himself, but I'm more fascinated with his obsession with Rondo and what it says about him. So that set us off on the journey. And we weren't certain we were going to do it, but we made those initial forays and talked to Bob's attorney. We went to Seguin We went to the Kingsbury Opry where Bob's Strange Act was performed, which you'll have to see that in the documentary. And we talked to Bob's brother. And at that point, we realized we had enough to do a film. So we set off on this journey. I had seen a movie called Becoming Bond about George Lazenby. I was actually covering it for the Austin Chronicle and was there and met George Lazenby. He's kind of the guy who was a one-time Bond and then turned it down after that. And that film was done with Lazenby sitting in a chair with a nice backdrop, well lit. And the other half of the film was recreations from his life with an actor who didn't particularly look like him, but was a good actor. So when we started doing this film, I thought, yeah, that's kind of what we need to do. Because Bob's dead, Rondo's dead. Bob and Rondo, by the way, never met. They lived in different time frames. So we set about recreating scenes from their lives. And that's a long answer to a short question.
No, I like it. I like it because I mean, because I was one of the questions I had. I was really interested in how you went about the recreations, like because it was all there's a lot to achieve there, particularly with Rondo's makeup, which I thought was done excellently. And I just honestly, I really enjoyed the recreations quite a bit.
Oh, well, thanks. If people either like them or hate them.
Yeah, everybody's a critic.
Yeah. It's a low budget film. And so with recreations, we hit them one at a time. I'd have to gather the money to pay for them. Each one was a mini movie, with different time frames. And there's a city, Taylor, Texas, a small town. And they had all these older buildings. There's the mayor pro tem was part of a car club, a classic car club. And I could call him and he would enlist people to show up. So we're showing Rondo meeting his wife in 1934, Tampa, Florida. And that's the first big scene that we did. A lot of extras. And suddenly a squadron of Model Ts comes down the road and we know we're going to make it. It was amazing.
Beautiful.
It was fantastic. And the buildings were just right. And we had to get the costumes. It's an interesting thing to do. Low budget filmmaking, which means me as producer, I'm gathering a lot of this stuff. I'm writing the scene unless it's something that was already written. There are scenes that are recreations using actors that are just the words of old journalists. Somebody commented in one thing about a scene that sounded like it was a bad gangster movie from the 40s. And the answer is it was written in the 1940s. By the guy in the scene, I
adore so much all the old timey newspapermen talk that's in this movie.
Yeah,
I love that cadence so much.
Yeah, it's all real. And as far as the mask, there's a guy, Paul Smith, who's a genius, and we got lucky. Frankly, Paul Smith worked with Bob Burns. And could basically create anything. And so that the mask was created specifically for our actor. It had to make a cast of his face, and then from that make a solid cast. And then from that, he worked on the mask itself, working off of old photos. So he's been done before. Obviously, Rick Baker did the homage to him in The Rocketeer. But this is created just for our film. The same thing with aging May Hatton, which I thought is just a fantastic job. I think some people don't realize that's the same actress doing it.
Yeah, that took me a couple of scenes to catch on to, actually. The old age makeup was extraordinary.
Yeah, it was really cool. That's also why she's wearing a scarf at the bottom, so you hide the seam. And
she's have the Back to the Future problem where everyone has gills suddenly.
Right, that's it. That's it.
How long did it take to apply Rondo's makeup on every filming day?
It took a few hours, and he was there. Paul Smith was there for every scene that involved Rondo, and he was very meticulous about it. It had to be perfect. There was the difficulty of motion. We had to get the actor to exaggerate his mouth, and I think early scenes we didn't do it as well, and the scenes are out of order from what we shot, obviously. But there's some where he was still learning that. Again, low budget filmmaking, man. We're just going in there and doing it, which is kind of, and that's kind of my advice for people who want to make a movie. Too often they sit around and wait until the time is right and they have all the money. You just need to kind of go do it. Start
Yeah,
making some shorts, you know?
yeah, just do it guerrilla style. Because
Yeah.
the passion of what you're doing comes through. Like that's what I really
Oh,
liked about
thanks.
the recreations is I think I think there may be for people who maybe wouldn't be like used to that kind of thing,
Yeah.
would maybe be a little bit like thrown off at first, but if you just let there's a charm to them.
Yeah.
Especially like the Rondo recreations, I think are great because it's a mini movie of Rondo's life if you just pay attention to those. And Bob's recreations, there's it's like Bob's personality is in them. So
Yeah.
uh, and because of that passion to like capture that, to me it elevates a lot of the limitations you had.
Yeah, and the deal is like I said, with becoming Bond, the actor not particularly looking that much like him. Uh, I went to the head of a drama program in Austin, Texas, and said, "I need someone to play him. Who have you got?" And he said, "I've got one guy who looks more like him, one guy who's a better actor." Because I'd seen Becoming Bond, I knew, give me the better actor. And Ryan Williams, who plays Bob, I feel like again, as it went along, he totally got into. Bob was a bit of a goofball.
Yeah.
He liked puns. He was a graphic designer, and his office was called RH Factor for Rondo Hatton. So there were always Easter eggs, around for him. But I think it worked out well.
Oh yeah, I his honestly, yeah, he doesn't look anything like him, but the performance almost becomes uncanny by the end of the film, where
Yeah,
I feel like you could fool me into thinking that was actually Bob
And that's
based on
so
like the
impressive.
voice and yeah,
That's so impressive considering you're seeing that performance side by side with actual footage of Bob throughout the movie.
yeah,
So that's asking a lot of an
yeah,
actor, especially playing that character throughout different eras of his life in varying stages of makeup. That's Williams
yeah.
did such an incredible job there. I was really impressed.
And we had the weird spots where we had access to the footage from the very first documentary done about Chainsaw by David Gregory, who's Severin Films. And I thought, well, it's too jarring to have the real Bob in this part. And so we used Bob's words and had our actors say them. And so again, that's stuff that's real. Uh, but it just seemed to work best for that scene, if that makes any sense.
oh definitely.
Uh, and it also made it easier because David Gregory said, well, I said, can we use this stuff? And he said, well, it's Bob's words. You're not using my video, so you don't even really need my permission. So that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, I was wondering that goes into a question I had, which is how long did it take you to like gather all of the materials and research for this? Because while it's a very in a way narrow subject because it's just Bob,
Mhm.
but it's from so many different sources and you have to track down so many different people. The more something's kind of unknown, the harder it is to nail down.
Yeah, some things just grow organically as we go, things that we didn't know. Obviously, we had to go out to Hollywood. We talked to Stuart Gordon, the director of Reanimator, who's unfortunately no longer with us, and he was a great guy, uh, and really liked Bob. And he talked about going to thrift stores with Bob. He would come to Texas and go to thrift stores with him because it was so amazing. Bob could create something out of nothing, and that's what he made his career on. Uh, so it our production took about 3 years total. Uh, that getting background, generating interviews and everything was all part of that. But we would have weird moments. Like we interviewed this guy who'd worked with Bob, and he said in an offhand way in the interview, "Did Bob ever tell you about the time as a kid he saw a man die?" And we're like, "No." But now we have to film that. Uh, so we turned around and filmed that. And we became fearless in the belief that we could pull stuff off. So that was another scene that was difficult to pull off because I didn't want to get permits from the city for a street to film on a street. So we knew this one street was actually owned by a company. And so we got permission from them instead, and we're able to do
Oh,
that.
wow.
And again, old cars, and I haven't talked about it enough, but we have a soundtrack that is largely songs by a guy named Ferris Nurala. Ferris, originally from El Paso, he and his brother were big in the Dallas music scene as the Nurala brothers. And this is one of the deals with making your own movie. You get to decide stuff like that. And there's a song called Problematico by him that I thought was very appropriate for Bob, and also it's a song I loved. And so I wanted it for the closing credits. In the end, we used 10 songs by him throughout the film. And I just, I'm just a big fan of his music. He's probably somebody most people have not heard of, but he's pretty amazing. I think he lives in St. Louis now.
The music adds a lot. I really did like the music used. So I actually didn't know it was just one guy.
Mainly,
Yeah.
not everything. In fact, we reused a little bit of music from Danger God. Not much, but a little bit. And those guys did some additional stuff for us as well. Two guys, Rob Larson and Jacob Pierce, did all our music for Danger God. And this, again, small budget. Both those guys are in the film. So the tower shooting scene. Rob Larson is the guy with blood spurting out of his arm. And I should probably explain that. We both Bob Burns and Tobe Hooper, the director of Chainsaw, were there the day in 1966 that the University of Texas tower shooting occurred. Charles Whitman climbed to the top of this tower with a lot of scopes and weapons and started shooting people around campus from up on high. It was one of the first real shootings like that, first real school shootings. And to me, we had to film that because it said something about them. You've got these two guys who are the real forces behind Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Bob for the look, Tobe for the conception, and they were both there that day, and they saw this. And Tobe Hooper did see a police officer shot. It's exactly like in our scene. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I think I had heard Toby talk about that in a few documentaries, but I didn't know Bob was also there. But it explains
I
a
didn't.
lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't either until I talked to his brother. And his brother said it to me offhand too. He was talking about Bob designed the sets for the summer musical in Austin, Texas, outdoor amphitheater situation. And he said, well, he was doing it that year. I know he was there in 1966 because that's the day of the tower shooting. And Bob said he wasn't going to be on campus, but he was. And we're like, oh, okay. So that led us in that direction.
people are throwing out just the strangest offhanded remarks about Bob's
Yeah,
life.
yeah. But that was really important, I think.
Yeah, that and Bob witnessing someone die when he was a kid, it's kind of crazy to me that wasn't something that was like baked into the film really early on, and just came about through interviews because it's so important
yeah,
to the overall story arc of Bob and the documentary.
yeah. And approaching the documentary like this, a lot of people may just be interested in how did you make the mask for Chainsaw Massacre? How did you get the bones for the set? That kind of thing. But I'm really more interested in the human story. And that's where this Rondo Hatton and Bob Burns thing really comes up. That's what I saw from the beginning, was Bob as this normal looking guy who was weird, and I mean it as a compliment, and Rondo as a very normal guy who was odd looking because of his condition. And so that was the driving force from the beginning, that notion.
Yeah, it's something I really wanted to commend you for, actually. Was not making the focus on Bob or Rondo's films, not so much. If you talked about them, it was how it relates to them personally, but it was never about that. Because I was almost afraid as the documentary was going on that it would kind of fall into that.
Yeah.
And I was getting more into the story of these people. And
Well, good.
it's, it would have been a very easy and, quite frankly, cheap to just like, oh, people can watch interviews about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Creeper all day. So let's make a
Yeah.
documentary about that. So
And
just to avoid
we
that
had to make sure
completely,
it
I
wasn't
really appreciate it.
we had to make sure it wasn't a Texas Chainsaw Massacre documentary. Because that's a real pull as well. And, we talked to most of the living folks the living cast members. We didn't talk to the meat hook lady, but I should have. Terry, I'm forgetting her last name.
Say that for the sequel.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe so. Maybe so.
Was it difficult to get people close to Bob to talk about him though?
Not really.
Really?
We had to gain some trust, and there was a guy who ended up being our associate producer, Ed Toutant. Ed Toutant is an interesting story himself because Ed Toutant is currently ranked number 6 all time on game show winnings, and
Okay.
Ed financed a lot of Bob's projects that he did in Austin when Bob was making his own films. These kind of failures that were never really released, like his film Scream Test. And I had to kind of get Ed's trust. But then he fell into it head on. He is no longer with us. During the production of the film, he developed a brain tumor and died.
Oh God.
And so the film is dedicated to him. So yeah, I guess I had to on that level. And the same with his brother. And I ended up talking to 2 of his 3 brothers. I didn't talk to one. And they're kind of spread out geographically. I got lucky that Bob's brother, who is a psychotherapist, happened to be visiting from Canada. And we caught him just as he was in town for a day, which was very cool. He's the one who diagnosed Bob as having an attachment disorder. We kind of go into that stuff that there's a hint that the Burns family, the Burns brothers, Asperger's or some form of autism was present. I don't know about all of them, but Bob certainly had something like that.
I was very taken by that moment where I believe it was Bob's nephew who said, "I'm the only one in the family who's been diagnosed with anything, but we sure do have a lot of eccentric loners in our family tree." And that speaks to me so much because, like, everybody either has a family like that or knows a family like that, where there's clearly a history of untreated mental illness going on, and it just kind of gets hand waved away by the community as, "Oh, he's a hermit," or "Oh, he's just a little weird." You get to learn how to deal with them, and it's fine.
Yeah.
And that was very unexpected. We had talked to Fred Burns, Bob's brother, and we were in Bob's nephew's apartment, which was very sparsely furnished, had a big tower of CDs just stacked on one on top of each other. And we said, "Well, why don't we talk to you for a minute?" And then he said this, and it's like, oh, well, that's going in the film. That's where filmmaking like this is a process of discovery.
Just going off of that, I guess this is more of like, and you don't have to answer this, but more of like a personal opinion of looking back. Do you feel like, I don't know, Bob's family or close circle could have reached out to him better, particularly with his childhood? And
I think they did the best they could. I think we're all dealing with our stuff. And here's the deal about Bob, and this is said we have a little clip of his memorial service. And the guy basically says, Bob had a ton of friends. He just couldn't get close to people, but he had a ton of friends, and he would phone them all the time. We played at Cinema Wasteland in Cleveland, and the guy in charge of it said that Bob would call him once a week, and he had just met the guy a couple of times. So Bob's final appearance was at Cinema Wasteland in 2014, where he brought a lot of the Chainsaw cast folks, and a lot of them discovered the film festival. Basically, they discovered the ability, the cons, that they could go to these, and it would be a good experience for them, and maybe they'd make a little money. So he had a lot of friends. It's a strange thing. I'm sure that some of them think they could have done more, but I don't know that they could. He was a very social, antisocial person, if that makes any sense.
No, it's difficult when the person doesn't really want to reach out in that kind of way.
Yeah, and I think he wasn't capable of it. That's the big deal. Gary Kent was his good friend, and he told Gary that he felt like he was incapable of love, and that's pretty tough.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking to hear.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? I don't have an answer.
And then you played against Rondo, who's just full of love.
Yeah, Rondo, who had this condition, and he said this like in his last interview. He talked about it that he could go hide from the world, but instead he chose to embrace it and go be right in your face and not worry about it. Though I think he was worried about scaring children. That scene that we have with him with the child in the post office, totally true. That's been spoken about many times.
Wow.
But he chose to embrace it, and people really liked him. That's the impression I get. That Rondo was a great guy. He was a soldier himself, and he would take World War II soldiers into his house. Folks who had been damaged by the war. Uh, you know, and he was living an interesting life. He did not think of himself as an actor. He thought of himself as a writer. And I actually have a copy of a script that he wrote uh, that maybe somebody will do something with one day.
Oh,
But
wow.
kind of, yeah,
Yeah, that was something that was completely unexpected. Like
yeah,
I didn't know a whole lot about Rondo Hatton, but I just kind of assumed like, okay, he had a condition, he made some money out of it in Hollywood for a couple of years, and that's his story. Finding out that Rondo was a journalist and a pillar of his community,
right, yeah,
I
and
would
then
have
he,
given anything to see Rondo on the beat. His little newsman hat.
yeah, yeah, that would be cool. I mean, Tampa was, and this is stuff we didn't go as much into. Tampa was a dangerous place. It had a lot of crime in that period. And Rondo was originally writing about news. He was writing about crime. He was kind of into it, but in the end, he went towards sports because that's his big interest. He wanted to be an athlete, and he was a good one before the acromegaly hit. So.
Did you ever have an interest in kind of revisiting Rondo, but as a singular subject?
No, I'd like to see somebody else do that. I am looking. I would like to do at least a short film about the Rondo from my neck of the woods in Austin, Texas. There's a guy, and his name was Hans Hartkopf, and Hans was. When you get acromegaly, it depends on the time period that you get it in your life. By the time Rondo got it, his body was fully developed, so his hands, feet, and his face continued to grow because of it. He was still a pretty small guy. I had to pad him up for the movies. But Hans Hartkopf was huge all over, and he was a car racer and had a shop in Austin down in Prime area. They said that you could put your whole fist through a ring that he had on one of his fingers. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but and I'd kind of like to do something about him, a different story. And I've had some contact with family members of that guy. I think somebody should do a standalone, feature film about Rondo, big budget. I'd like to see what happens with it,
Me
and I
too,
would not
yeah.
be jealous of it. I would encourage somebody to go do that. But I think they need a good budget to really do something. Bob wanted to do that. That was his goal. He said that Sandra Bullock would be the right person to play May Hatton. So, and his script, I didn't. His script was inspiration in many ways, but we didn't follow his script, which went in a lot more to that crime beat stuff that we were talking about. Uh, I don't know if May Hatton would be if Sandra Bullock would be the right person now for her. I'm not sure who it would be.
Has anyone ever looked into making Bob's script in the
I
past?
think they did it sometime in the past, but probably nobody even knows about it anymore. I've still got my copy.
Yeah,
So
damn, I would love to see somebody shop that around and
yeah, that's one of the difficulties with this film that I knew from the beginning would be a difficulty, which is that a lot of people want more Rondo and a lot of people want more Bob. And I kind of had to stick with my notion of the film. And this will not be apparent to anybody, but we really make an effort. The film is a bit of a collage, and we had color coded Post-it notes on the wall of the editing office, and I kept moving them around. Uh, because I didn't want you to ever reach a point where you said, "Where's Rondo?" or "Where's Bob?" I wanted it to be seamless, that you would go back and forth. And, there would be the moments that are both of them. Again, even though they never met. Uh, So it's a challenge. It's whether people buy into that conception or not.
I
I
think it
can't.
has a really good balance.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. And one thing, you were talking earlier about we were talking about things just coming up. This is one of the deals too about being an independent filmmaker. I watched the movie The Third Man with Orson Welles, and there's this scene in the French sewage system, and there are all these brick walls in the sewer, and I thought it was really beautiful. And I told my editor, I was saying, I'd really like to recreate that. And he told me about a place in Austin that looked kind of like it. And it was a little bit shady, a shady area. And they were having a special event near there with lights at Christmas time. And so the beginning of the film is our version of that tunnel. And then the end is the lights. And Rondo walked in through the series of lights, and blue lights. They blinked one after another, and then they went out all at once. Totally, lucky for us. And we were doing guerrilla filmmaking that day. There were tons of tourists running around that area, and we had to hold them off for just a couple of minutes to shoot that shot. In the end, I found out that The Third Man was filmed in a studio, which was funny, But it's kind of fun to be able to do that thing, where you say, yeah, this is really pretty. I want to do something like that. I felt it was the mood of Rondo.
Yeah,
Too,
it's beautiful. I kind of can't believe that was like so guerrilla style. It
Yeah.
felt so, impactful and perfectly planned.
Yeah. I wish, yeah, I can't say that things are always planned. A lot is, the broad storyline is planned, but things come up as you go.
Honestly, it makes it
The
more
nature.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, it's just there's something almost in the air in the making of the film that really pulls it all together. Plus, it's more creativity. You want to go out and set about doing a particular idea, a particular thing, and then what is presented in front of you that you can form and meld into what you want.
Yeah. Like that University of Texas tower shooting. We could not shoot at the UT campus. We would never get permission. So we found what was a closed high school, and it was being renovated. And I think much of that is done now. It was being renovated into being a home for a bunch of different small businesses. So we were able to get that, fairly inexpensively, and it matched so well. I mean, we have some shots that are from the actual tower shooting. There's one of a staircase, and it matches our staircase at this place. It's just amazing. We continually got lucky.
Yeah, I would not have thought unless you pointed out that wasn't just shot at a university during like the summer or something.
Yeah. Yeah, we couldn't, too much trouble, too much work to get permission for that. So, and they've got good lawyers. So we couldn't go guerrilla on that. A lot of other stuff, but not on that one.
You don't want to oppose the school board.
Right. The
Uh,
regents. Yeah.
how's the since it's been released because obviously it took you a couple years, but how's it? I know it's been playing a lot of festivals. How's it been getting like received? You've been happy with what you've been hearing?
I have, yeah, and there's been some amazing reviews. There's people who don't like it, but we've had some amazing reviews and people who really get it, get what we're trying to accomplish. It's weird because I'm from Austin and we had trouble screening in Austin. We didn't get into festivals in Austin. Part of that is because Fantastic Fest canceled, and then by the time they came back, the COVID stuff really got us. By the time they came back, we'd already had a Texas premiere, which they required. And so we had a really hard time. And then we ended up somehow falling into a week-long screening at the Galaxy Theater in Austin, which turned out to be a great place. And it wasn't a four-wall. It was them actually picking up the film and paying us for screening it, which was both, really heartening and scary because we had to try to fill seats.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. We had very little notice to try, and that was right before the streaming release, so that was helpful. But overall, it seems like the reaction is good. It's a strange thing. You really don't know. We're getting more things that are wide. We were had a review on public radio in Southern California that just came out. For some reason, we got some traction in California. We're in an alternate weekly in the Oakland area, a nice piece there. So we're picking up steam.
Yeah,
It's
hopefully it picks up a lot because I think I love to see it, hit something like Shudder because I think
I would
with
too.
yeah, with horror fans especially, there's a lot struggle with personal issues or mental health problems, and know these figures, but don't know them that way, and I think they would find themselves. I could see this really being something that plays the overall community in a big way and really takes off.
Yeah, it's tough. With an independent film, you are shouting in a crowded room.
Yeah.
So some level, you just have to be lucky that people pick up on it. And we live in a world that's so segmented as it is when it comes to media. Different people listening and watching different things. That it can be difficult too. But you just do the best you can and keep pushing it. That's all we can do.
Uh, um, what's something you do you want people to like really take away from the film?
Um, I would like people to take away the sense of creativity. I think that applies to both Rondo and Bob. That you can go and make stuff. It applies to us in making this film. You can go make stuff, and I think to me, the joy in my life is creating things, uh, and so there's satisfaction in that. I think this film is also a love letter to horror fans. It's been called that by a couple of different reviewers. Um, there is this fandom. I'm so continue to be so amazed by Chainsaw fans and how rabid they are about this film, and they're really rabid about Bob Burns. They want to know how he made those masks. There's a lot of people trying to recreate it all the time, uh, and they're really nice people. Horror fans are nice people. I don't know if people would expect that or not, but
Generally, they're the best, probably the best, like film fan community around. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Yeah. And particularly these Chainsaw folks. I mean, I don't, I don't know what it is about Chainsaw that it endures to such a high level, but it does. I think a lot of that goes to Bob Burns. I think a lot of it probably goes to Wayne Bell for the sound in that film, which is so creepy, you know. And, as we explore in the film, Bob and Toby Hooper went round and round about their view of this film. And Bob, with the meat hook scene, Bob told Toby that there should be no blood in that scene because if you show a lot of blood, people are going to be wondering about the effect instead of just being creeped out in the moment. That was his philosophy about art direction in general, that the art direction should be invisible. It should just be creeping you out. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
looking at it and saying, oh, that's cool. I like the way they did that. You
That
know?
was fascinating to learn that came from Bob because honestly, I mean, it's something that everyone always brings up with Chainsaw is
Yeah.
the meat hook scene, and then you start thinking about okay, that's Bob's philosophy. You start thinking about all the other movies he's worked on, and oh, all of that lines up. It's so, and then everyone looks at Texas Chainsaw as oh, it's the bloodiest movie ever made, and there's
And it's not bloody at
nary a
all.
drop of blood in the entire picture.
Yeah. But it's
And that,
incredibly creepy, you know?
and that's I guess that's kind of in many ways the tragedy of a good art director is they are invisible, and in many ways they end up being the unsung heroes of movie making, especially in horror. Like it's crazy that we're in kind of a horror documentary boom right now with covering a
Wow.
lot of niche subjects. I think this is the only documentary about an art director I've ever seen.
It may be. It may be the first one anywhere. I don't know. Uh, they have to be important, and I think Bob's important enough to rate the closer examination. I don't know who else would be, but there's probably somebody out there. It's probably something I don't know about.
I think art direction in films generally are kind of unsung as far as like examination go.
Yeah.
Just think art directors are often really overlooked. They're overlooked from people look at the director, the makeup artists, uh, they'll look at like production designers, but there's art direction is like such a specific talent and trait that
Yeah.
when it's right and it blends perfectly into the directorial style of the film, which I think is what made also the look and feel of Texas Chainsaw work so well, is those two. It is Hooper's directorial style and Bob's art direction blended
Yeah.
into this like just cacophony of creepiness and just grunginess that
And I think you're looking also at the fact that Hooper had been doing this since he was a kid. He'd been making horror films. Uh, One of the people that I felt I had to include, because I was lucky to track him down, was his childhood friend, and they made movies together. And that to me was kind of fascinating, just to talk to this guy about who Toby Hooper was as a kid. And there is a book being written about him, about Toby Hooper, that I think will be kind of interesting. That talks about some of those early films that he made. But yeah, he was, his dad managed motel or hotels in Texas, and Toby would take advantage of that location and shoot stuff there. And he moved around a little bit in high school, so I don't know if he had a whole lot of friends, but he was in his head and had friends like Wayne, the guy I'm talking about, and could recruit them to go make movies and get in trouble, because they did get stopped by the cops for a bloodied guy in the street, that kind of thing, which I thought was great. But I just got lucky to track down Wayne. I used Facebook to find him. I sent him a note and said, "Are you this guy?" He said, "Yes, I am." And was a pilot, so he actually flew in to Austin for me to interview him.
Wow.
Yeah, so very cool.
Yeah, you got some really interesting figures for the talking heads in this, and just
Yeah,
all kinds of different folks. And I just like how each one brought like a different facet of the individual they were talking about. Like there was kind of like very specific to them, and I dig that about certain documentaries. Whenever it's, well, this friend only really ever saw kind of like this side, so we have this friend who only ever saw this side, and then you can kind of like put them back to back, and you get like this larger picture that like kind of no one knew, like two puzzle pieces going together.
yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, what you leave out may matter as much as what you focus on, because you've got to trim down. We left out a whole lot about Bob Burns, other things about him that his brother said, "Well, where's the genealogy?" Because Bob Burns was really into genealogy, which kind of fit. He was estranged a lot from his family, but he was into the story of his family history.
That makes a lot of sense. Huh?
Yeah, and uh, he made a video that he sold about genealogy. And again, this is all in the days before Ancestry.com and easy, Google searches and all that kind of thing. His whole search for Rondo Hatton was done through the U.S. mail and phone calls, because he didn't have the stuff that we take for granted now.
Yeah,
You
it's
can almost
amazing
make
to
an
think that
entire
not that
narrative picture about just Bob searching for Rondo.
Yeah,
because I mean at
yeah,
that time, I mean so much of it was just boots on the street, sending out letters. Like you had to be a detective to be a hardcore fan back then. Like that's fascinating to me.
yeah. And so he just sent letters out. We have a restored old theater in Austin, and he would go there when films were playing and set up his camera, I guess with permission. I'm not sure, and find Rondo in the background of all these movies. I think if you look on IMDb, they have like maybe 60 credits for Rondo. I think he did a lot more. His most of his career was these small parts in the background, sometimes just really weird ones, and often in fairly high profile films of that period. Uh, so there's probably still some searching to do to find Rondo in the background. And I was fascinated by Bob's search and what that said about him, his search for Rondo.
It's spiritual almost for Bob.
Yeah, yeah. And I think he was a completist. So you see some of those actual photos of that he shot in the theater of Rondo as a small part when he sits down with Mayhat. Those are real stuff. We had access to Bob's Rondo photo collection. for a while. Had to give it back eventually, but that was kind of fascinating. He had
Yeah,
tons of stuff, just tons.
yeah, I could not imagine just sitting down and going through Bob's things.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, and they're out there. He prepared a box. He was an organized guy, and he had a rondo box. When he died, there was this box, and I don't know if it's gone there, but it's supposed to go to some museum in Florida. Uh, you know, interesting stuff. I'm glad we had access to it. It helped a whole lot.
Saw some pictures after watching the documentary. I was delving into stuff and of a rondo party that Bob threw,
Right.
and it's like this beautiful big sheet cake that Bob took black icing and then drew rondo on it,
Yeah.
and like it
A
was
good
just
likeness.
crazy to see rondo on like this big cake and this beautiful piece of art for just like
Yeah.
this random party.
Right. Bob was known for his interesting parties, and that was Rondo Hatton's 100th birthday party, which was a big deal. So a big deal for Bob. But his house was full of interesting objects, a lot that he had created. You'd see the armchair from Chainsaw over in the corner. You'd see the deep throat pinball machine that Bob created, which has shown up in a few films, and which shows up in our documentary. The actual pinball machine does.
Oh, that was
So
the original. Wow.
yeah, I told you about the guy Ed Toutant, and we got his confidence, and he showed us around his house, and in the laundry room area there was the pinball machine, and we're like, and Gunnar Hansen's memoir, he writes about interviewing with Bob to be Leatherface, and he talks about playing that pinball machine, that it was there in the office, and so I said, okay, we have to shoot this, but I don't want to move the pinball machine. We have to shoot it right here. And so I had to go collect bones to fill Bob's office. So I did. I went.
You got to play Bob for a little while.
Yeah, I bought some like off of Craigslist, and then I got them from other people who lived out in the sticks, and we just kind of filled up his office as best we could. And there are a bunch of little Bob Easter eggs for people who are big fans. Bob did a show called Memories of Meat, where he showed off his stuff, all his props from Chainsaw. He did this on the University of Texas campus not long after the film came out. And we have on the wall of his office the poster from that, which probably is beyond collectible.
Yeah,
I've only
I'd say.
seen one other one, and that's in the Austin History Center.
To have gone to that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that would have been crazy.
I was thinking about earlier today, like if Bob Burns were still with us now, he would have the greatest YouTube channel of all time, just showing off all of
That's
his
cool.
props and his cool things he made and doing weird
Yeah.
videos. But the internet was kind of made for guys like Bob.
Yeah, it's too bad he didn't stick around. I think he would have created a whole lot more interesting stuff. That's an interesting notion. Yeah, I think he would definitely be that guy. He'd have a podcast.
Yeah, honestly, I look at a lot of people like that. It's like if they were just here now, they'd have kind of more of the outlet that they were really striving for, but wasn't
Yeah.
afforded to them. Like, and hell, the ability to actually make that Rondo movie that he wanted to make in some form, with more of the internet age that we're in now versus the kind of early and mid 2000s and stuff.
Yeah, much more accessible. I think he would like it. I wish he'd stuck around.
Yeah.
It's a shame. And he was a nice guy. I knew him in the last years of his life. We tried to put on a film festival in a suburb of Austin named Pflugerville with a silent P, Puff Pflugerville. And he created stuff for publicity as we tried to get this thing together. It never quite happened, but he made up a special costume just for that, which was really cool. It's a film director being carried by a nurse. It's somewhat similar to the one in the film with the bathtub, and probably a rejiggering of that, but it was cool.
That bathtub costume was fantastic.
It is, and he could do those things. When he died, people went into his house and they opened a closet and they saw the mannequin that was part of that costume, and they thought they were seeing something really weird, like, oh, it's a weird sex toy or something. No, that's just Bob. That's just Bob making stuff.
That would have made Bob so happy to know that was the reaction.
Right? I think it would. Yeah.
I think that's my favorite story in that entire movie is Bob having to swear that all of those blow-up dolls in the attic are for work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a crazy story, and that little short film has never been released anywhere. So that
Yeah,
chunk you see is about it. We have to put out a Blu-ray so that we can put stuff like that on it,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and maybe his unreleased film as
I was
well.
gonna ask about that. Like, is that like I know it hasn't been released in any official capacity. Is that just sitting on a shelf somewhere? Like, could that be released?
It's just videotape. There are like 8 or 10 copies of it on videotape, and I have possession of those at this time. And the guy Ed Toutant who died, he was the sole financer of that. So I think that with his family's support, and they would certainly support it, we could put it on the Blu-ray.
Yeah, the
So
best
which would be
special
kind of
feature
cool.
ever. You
Yeah,
just
Yeah,
put
that
like
would
a
the
little
be.
sticker
entire
on there that says "Funded by real quiz show money."
right. It's true. Yeah. Yeah. Ed Toutant's a fascinating guy too. Somebody sent me a script that they were writing about Ed Toutant and the game show world. He was an engineer uh, who got totally into the game show stuff and then figured out a way to win. It was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that put him up to those high winnings. He lost, and then he talked them into giving him a second chance, and he won that time, uh, and won more than a million, like 1.8 million. So there's
The game show circuit world is like this. It's like a secrets society almost. Like there's so many
it is.
strange figures throughout like all of history of game shows.
Yeah, and there are these people who go to bars and play trivia and do that every week, and they're totally into it. It's just about mastering it and winning, uh, and that was the deal with Ed. Uh, so it was nice to have him involved in the film, and I wish he were still around as well. He's got a story. He's definitely got a story.
Yeah, Bob Burns seemed to like his friend group seemed to be like the X-Men of strange people.
Right.
There's so
I
many,
like that
but
description.
there's so many colorful characters that you meet by proxy just through this documentary.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. And other ones that we cut out. There's a lot of other characters that had to end up on the cutting room floor, unfortunately, who will be on that Blu-ray when it comes out.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I would love to see an entire book about the weeks Bob spent teaching Vanessa Redgrave to have a Southern accent. Where's that movie?
and the deal is Bob talked like this, and so and it's not a Texas accent as I know it. I don't know what his accent was, but Vanessa Redgrave is totally doing Bob Burns. I don't know if that's clear or
It
not.
explains a lot.
Yeah, because she talks like this, like Bob Burns, and it's crazy.
Bob talks like somebody putting on a voice. That's what's and so even like threw me off about the recreations at first until we like saw Bob. Like
Yeah,
it seems like Bob's always playing a character because of his voice.
and maybe he was in a certain way, and he
Yeah,
was an actor. That was in many ways, I think Bob saw himself as an actor. We have the whole thing, and he starred in Confessions of a Serial Killer, and we have that whole thing about that is that they chose him out of happenstance because they lost their guy. But the truth is, they were getting a guy who had been trained, who had a college degree in drama, and who was, successful at it. In that early age, he just couldn't find a way to make a career with it. So he had also been a set designer when he was in high school, and I think that may have led him forward more than anything else. That he could create anything, and he knew that. He also was very smart, and he knew that, and that could make him a pain in the ass as well. That he was that way. But yeah, he was a creative genius, And I
Definitely.
hope people will from this film will learn about him and learn about creativity in general.
Yeah, and it does that job well. So hopefully more and more people take that lesson and find the film.
Yeah,
Um, so we just don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we've talked a lot about the film. But how did you start in documentaries? Because you've had a very lauded career in journalism, but now you made
yeah.
two docs, and do you have anything else coming?
I have been my COVID time was spent working on a book that is also film related. It's
Oh,
called The Contortionists, and it's about three sisters from West Texas in the 1930s and 40s who escaped poverty by a chance encounter with a family of contortionists who taught them to do it. Their name was the
wow.
Ross sisters, and
That's
you have
amazing.
seen you have seen the video. I guarantee you. There's a video on YouTube that went viral a couple of years back, and it's of them doing their act to a song called "Solid Potato Salad." Look that
Oh,
up.
yeah. I think I do
Do you
know
know
that.
that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I believe I do.
Yeah. And so I was obsessed with finding out what happened to them, and I did. I found out what happened to them, and I am near the end. I'm going to Denver on Monday, where I'm a part of the Lighthouse Writers Workshop's book project. It's a 2-year program where they kind of assist you to complete your book, and that's what I needed. Uh, I have my first draft done, and I'm about to dive into revisions, pretty major revisions. Uh, and that may have been my next film, but it just seemed out of my budget. So, and I realized there are young female contortionists out there. There are actually quite a few. They're all YouTube stars now or TikTok. Uh, but there's a bunch of them, but more than I expected. So I hope that becomes a film, but it probably won't be by me. It'll just be a book.
Honestly can't wait for the book. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and it's full of drama, and what happened to them is pretty amazing. What happened in their lives. Uh, yeah. So I'm in the midst of that. So it's always kind of weird. That's what they say about if you're doing creative works. By the time people are critiquing your project, you should be working on another one. And I'm kind of following that motto, so that you don't get too upset because there is a certain level of you come out with a film and it's your baby and people look at it and say, well, your baby's ugly, you know? And you have to deal with that on some level. Some people are going to find your baby ugly. Some people are going to find your baby beautiful though too. So, uh, but you just keep making stuff, and I make it because that's what I do. I like to tell stories, and my background is both in journalism and in fiction. I have an MFA in creative writing, and I have one book that is out, but it's out of print now. Uh, so why do I do this stuff? Just because it seems like a good idea to tell stories, and I got into that with telling Gary Kent's story. I've written about Gary Kent. At a, I met him at an agents conference a million years ago, and came back and told my then girlfriend, now wife, that I met this amazing guy, and I said I needed to track him down and write about him. And so I wrote about him some, and then we became friends. And I kept telling him that somebody needs to do a documentary about you. And he was coming out with a memoir. And I realized that it was time for me to just do the documentary myself. And so I set off to do it. And it took a lot longer to do that than it did Rondo and Bob because I had to figure out how to do it, and that takes a while. There's a tendency to say, here's this story, and go to somebody who knows more about you, about the film process than you do, and say, here, make this for me. And in the end, I realized you cannot do that. You must do it. And I sat down with my editor, and the two of us cranked the film out, cranked out Danger God rather quickly, actually, the final edit. We did it over a summer. So that's another long answer to a short question.
You, I hope anyone listening to this is like walks away like creatively invigorated because I
I
want to
hope
keep up
so.
with your pace. You used
Well,
lockdown
they
time
take a long
well.
time to make. They take a long time to make. So
Yeah,
you have to be patient with that part of things. You think it's going to be done quickly. I mean, Rondo and Bob, COVID hit. man, it really messed us up. Uh, we had one screening at a film festival, and I don't know, and we won Best of Fest, but I don't know how many people were actually there. It was close to Rondo's hometown of Tampa, and I was not there because I was afraid of COVID. You know, so I don't, and then things ramped up, and we had a really nice festival run, and we're not done. We're accepted to a rather old and well-known horror festival. It's called Terror Molins in Spain. It's in Barcelona or Barcelona, depending on how you want to say it. So we're not actually done. I thought we were done with film festivals, but apparently we're not. I have a sales agent, and he says that part of that is that we need to sell the European market because we're just released in U.S. and Canada right now, so not the rest of the world. The rest of the world awaits.
That'll be an exciting little venture too. And just
Yeah.
to be really selfish, if you if you're interested doing bringing the film like Monster Mania or anything, it is near me, so I just love to
Oh, well, tell them.
to go to
Tell
a
them.
screening of that.
Yeah, yeah, we're open to any of the fests. Yeah, tell somebody there about us, and we would love to screen.
Oh yeah, I can definitely try to reach out to the promoter because it's so like Rondo and Bob is so up like their alley for some of the things they do.
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah, do it.
Awesome. I will, and it's been great having you on here. Cannot wait for that book.
Oh,
Obviously
thanks.
everyone needs to check out Danger God and definitely check out Rondo and Bob, which is streaming now. It's very easy to watch. Please, please, please watch it. Love to talk to you again, Joe. Thank you so
That'd be great.
much. Um,
Thank you.
is,
Thank you both.
is there anything you'd like to plug? Where can people find you?
No, I'm at joeoconnell.com. There's rondoandbob.com. We have a Facebook page and, Rondo and Bob on Twitter. So we're all over the place. Try to keep all that stuff updated as much as possible.
Fantastic. Well, this has been Box Office Pulp. This has been Joe Connell with us. I've been Mike. This has been Jamie. You can, of course, always find us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, all the various podcast places. But, of course, boxofficepulp.com. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You people listening know the drill. So,
You're all sick of us already.
hey, good night, everybody.
And like that, he's gone.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.